Hey guys, and welcome to today's video. So recently I have been asked quite a lot by you guys whether or not I'll be upgrading my 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro to one of the new MacBook Pros that's just been announced with Apple Silicon. You've also been asking whether or not you should do the same, whether or not you should be jumping on board with the new Apple Silicon machines. So I'm going to kind of just do this video to answer a few of those questions and go through a little bit and hopefully answer the question as to whether or not you should or should not upgrade from the Intel MacBook Pro to one of the new ones. So first thing I will say is obviously buy what you need. At the end of the day, if you are a power user and you need all of the power in the new MacBook Pros and your Intel machine isn't cutting it at the moment, then that answers your question right off the bat. At the end of the day, if you have a workflow that requires it, needs it and works with it, then just do that. It doesn't really matter about anything else. But hopefully for, I guess, the users like myself, where you're kind of stuck in this middle ground where you do use it for work or you use it for creativity, but you don't necessarily want to shell out that massive cost for one of the new machines, hopefully this video will help you. So first off, let's talk about some of the reasons why you should upgrade from the Intel MacBook Pro 16-inch. Now, if you have anything before the Intel MacBook Pro 16-inch, then it becomes a more difficult question because they had their own flaws, like the butterfly keyboards, wasn't a fan of, and ultimately they had a lot of overheating issues. But if you have the 16-inch MacBook Pro, then chances are you got this for a reason. And that reason is that it's a powerful machine, it kind of has everything in there. So it's a harder sell to move across to one of the newer ones. So let's talk about some of the reasons why you do want to upgrade from this Intel one and just get rid of it. And the first one is, this is probably going to be worth the most it's ever going to be worth now. So if I want to trade this in with Apple directly, it's only going to go down in terms of cost. They're not going to give me more in the future if I hold on and hope for the best. Also selling privately, chances are all those prices are going to slowly get driven down as the new Apple Silicon MacBooks become more widely available. Some of those start going onto the refurb sites, everything else. So the cost of this is ultimately going to go down and I am going to lose value on it. So by hanging on for a later date, you're ultimately going to be losing some of that trade-in value on your old machine. So that is something worthwhile bearing in mind. The other thing to consider as well is future OS updates for this. So at the moment, you're pretty much getting feature parity with the Apple Silicon machines. However, with the latest version of macOS, there were some features that didn't come across to Intel versions just because apparently they couldn't quite handle it. Now, I'm not calling Apple out for this. At the end of the day, they absolutely want to take advantage of the power efficiency and everything that comes with Apple Silicon. So there are, of course, going to be software updates and software features that will only be available on their new Apple Silicon machines. But again, that's worthwhile bearing in mind. At the moment, it does everything that I need it to. But if you are somebody who really likes to be on the cutting edge of technology and loves seeing some of those new features and some of that kind of, I guess, magic integration that Apple does with other devices as well, just bear in mind that you might lose out on some of those features as it goes into the future. So with the next update that we see to macOS, chances are you'll be seeing less of those updates come across to your older Intel version and they'll be more exclusive towards your Apple Silicon. Other reasons to upgrade is just the sheer amount of power that you get from the new Apple Silicon machines. So even with the new macOS Monterey, this thing has improved massively. So my battery life is much better on the 16-inch MacBook Pro at the moment, and also as well its performance seems a lot less laggy. So Apple did some kind of magic there to fix it, but that's a completely different subject. However, with the new Apple Silicon machines, you get so much more efficiency. So if you are somebody who is out in the field, you're out visiting clients, you're out working away from a power socket a lot of the time, then ultimately you're going to have so much more efficiency from the new machines that you don't get on the Intel machines, regardless of what software updates that they do. So if you are somebody who is a mobile user and needs that kind of mobile desktop experience without kind of sacrificing that power, then ultimately it might be something worthwhile looking at. You've also got the sheer strength of the machine. It can do so much without being plugged in or having to worry about that. Fans don't spin up, so there is a lot of magic in those new machines. Obviously, your use case will vary, and if your old 16-inch MacBook Pro is doing the job, then we'll get onto that with the why not to upgrade later on. So the final thing to talk about is the ports. So on your older Intel versions, you literally just get your Thunderbolt and USB Type-C, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And again, we'll talk about this in why not to upgrade later on. But if you are somebody who is going out to different offices, for example, and you find yourself in a jam where you need a HDMI cable and you have to root through your bag to get a dongle and everything else, it can become a bit of a nightmare for some types of users. If you're a creative that is on the go and you need that micro SD slot, again, you then have to reach for the dongle to do it. With the new MacBooks, you've got ports and it's a massive, massive difference. And the final thing to talk about is that redesign. So we have a much nicer screen. Granted, it has a notch in there, but for some users that will be an issue. For some users, it won't be an issue. And as part of that sort of edge-to-edge display that we're seeing, you also get an improved webcam. So if you are somebody who's constantly doing a lot of web conferences, you're doing a lot of Zoom calls, for example, then it might be the machine for you. So obviously, there's quite a few reasons there why you might want to upgrade. And again, if your workflow needs that additional power, then it might be worthwhile looking into. However, there's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't upgrade, and personally I won't be upgrading from the 16-inch MacBook Pro, my Intel version, and here's a couple of the reasons why. So I talked there about the fact that this is only going to lose value, and that is very true. At the end of the day, I can trade this in now, and it's probably the maximum it's ever going to be worth if I trade it in with Apple or if I sell it privately. However, even right now, if I were to trade this or sell it, I don't get a massive amount. I'm still going to be paying at least £1,000 in order to upgrade from this to move to another 16-inch MacBook Pro with Apple Silicon. Now, that's a relatively large sum of money, and ultimately, this does exactly what I need it to. So bear that in mind. If your machine is currently doing what you need it to, it's probably going to last for quite a while yet. Is it really worth the additional cost to do that? Ultimately, if I wanted to take part in Apple Silicon, I could buy myself something like an M1 Mac Mini and just put that additional money towards that and still have my MacBook Pro 16-inch. Other reasons not to upgrade is the ports. Now, obviously, I have just mentioned that the ports are one of the reasons to upgrade, but it's also one of the reasons not necessarily to jump on board with it. Chances are, if you have been using a MacBook Pro from the last few years, you have some kind of dongles. It's just an inevitable part of life being an Apple laptop user. Now, I have dongles galore, and they all do everything that I need it to, and the vast majority of the time I will only ever need that dongle when I'm at home and it's docked into my monitor or I'm doing anything like that. So for that, I don't really need a dongle because it's already there as like a desktop setup. When I'm out and on the go, I also have another little dongle that I take with me, which has USB, it has micro SD, and it has HDMI out. So for me, it's not actually that much of an issue. I love the fact that ports are back because ultimately in the future it means I won't necessarily have to have dongles, but for so many people now, they already have those dongles. If you have an iPad as well, you might be using dongles for that. It doesn't take away the need to have a dongle, so it's a bit of a tricky one really. Again, your use case is going to vary depending on what dongles you need, what ports you need and all of that, so take that one with a grain of salt. It might be a reason to upgrade, but it also might not actually be a reason to upgrade. Another reason you might want to hold off upgrading is we just don't know what's coming out next for Apple. So for me at the moment, the reason why I'm hanging on to this is, apart from the ones I've already covered, is I quite like the idea of just having a desktop Mac with Apple Silicon. So something like the new iMac that might hopefully be coming out with a larger display, or hopefully a new Mac Mini that will be coming out next year. So I would rather go towards having a separate desktop which just has a little bit more power, takes advantage of those new chips, and just hang on to this older 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro. At the end of the day, it gives me the portability from this if I do need to go somewhere. Granted, my battery life isn't as good, but it doesn't bother me too much. It gives me enough power to get me through, I guess, my out working day. And then when I'm at home, I'd have that Apple Silicon desktop instead. With the money I would be losing by trading this in at quite a large loss than buying one of the newer ones, I can just hold on to that cash and put it towards a new desktop instead in the future. And the final reason, and we've already kind of covered this, is for me, this does everything that I need it to. It still has all the power I need. It still has all the performance that I need from it. And chances are it's doing the same for you as well. If you bought an Intel MacBook Pro 16-inch, then obviously it's going to be a relatively recent purchase. And chances are it's doing everything that you need it to. There's a reason you upgraded to it. Maybe it was the keyboard. Maybe it was the performance. Maybe it was the larger screen. And ultimately, you're still going to be getting everything that this machine does as of, before the new Apple Silicon 16-inch ones were announced. It still does the same thing, and it's still giving you that same level of performance. So if it worked for you, I don't know, like a month ago, then it's still going to continue working for you. And even with future OS updates, I can't see Apple absolutely hindering this or bringing anything too magical yet to the, I guess, Apple Silicon versions, because we don't have the full transition of all the Intel Macs. Once Apple have finished moving all of their Mac lineup across to Apple Silicon, I'm sure we'll start to see some more, I guess, intense features that maybe you would kind of have Apple Silicon envy. But as of right now, this does everything I need it to, and chances are it's probably doing the same for you as well. Again, your use case will vary. This might have only just been doing what you needed it to, and you want, better performance, and you need that better performance. But if you're in that place, then you already know that you need to upgrade, so I guess it's kind of no point in watching this video. You've probably already made your mind up. But for the vast majority of people who have this machine, even though it's Intel, even though it's losing some value, it's still doing everything that you need it to, and it still performs as good today. In fact, better today with the new macOS update than it did just a couple of months ago. So for me, I'm hanging on to it until we see what comes out next year in terms of their desktop lineup and some upgrades there, and I'll just see how long this thing lasts me. So I hope that video's helped you. I know it's not necessarily going to push you in one direction. Personally for me, and my recommendation is, unless you absolutely need the power and performance of the new 16-inch Macs, then I would hang fire and just keep hold of your older Intel hardware at the moment. If you really, really want to get in on that space, have a look at just the M1 Mac, so the M1 MacBook Pro or the M1 MacBook Air, or even the Mac Mini, because ultimately they are going to give you a lot of the benefits of Apple Silicon. Obviously in a smaller package or in a desktop package, but they will still give you a lot of those benefits, and you get to hang on to your older hardware rather than trading in at a loss and, you know, putting that money towards a different machine. If you're a power user, then more power to you, and chances are you probably need that hardware. But if not, and like me, this is getting you by, then hang on to it for now, see what Apple bring out next year, and we'll go from there. So I hope that video's helped. I know I kind of might have just confused things even more, but who knows. If you've got any questions, throw them down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer those. And obviously, let me know, are you going to be trading in your Intel MacBook Pro 16-inch, or are you hanging on to it like me? And if you are hanging on to it, what is it that you're waiting for? Is it like me, where you were hoping that there's going to be a new M1 Mac Mini? Are you looking for one of the new iMacs when they eventually come out? Or are you kind of going full hog and hoping to see what they bring out with that Mac Pro? Because that's going to be pretty juicy by all accounts. So hit that like and subscribe button, come along for some more content, and we will see you soon. Bye.